Now listen closely. When someone has an avoidant attachment style, love does not look loud. It does not always look poetic. It does not always come wrapped in constant reassurance and grand declarations. For them, love feels dangerous. Intimacy feels like standing on the edge of a cliff with no guardrail, so when they move toward you instead of away from you, that is not casual. That is courageous. Understand this. People don't resist love because they don't feel it. They resist it because they do. When an avoidant feels authentic love for you, you will see a shift. It may be subtle at first, but it is powerful. They will begin to lean in when every instinct tells them to lean out. They will stay in conversations that once would have triggered their exit. They will sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. That is not weakness. That is devotion in its rawest form. Love, real love, is not about perfection. It is about progress. If someone who once guarded their heart like a fortress starts opening small windows for you, that is sacred. If they begin sharing their fears, their doubts, the stories that shape them, they are not just talking, they are trusting. And trust for the avoidant is holy ground. You must understand the psychology and the spirit behind this. An avoidant learn to go that closeness equals pain, that dependency equals loss, that vulnerability equals danger. So if they are choosing to connect with you consistently, intentionally, they are rewriting their internal blueprint. That is transformation. When they include you in their future, when they say next month or next year, and your name is in the sentence, that is not small talk. That is them anchoring you into their life story. When conflict arises and instead of disappearing, they stay, maybe clumsy, maybe defensive at first, but they stay, that is love fighting fear. Love is not measured by how loudly someone proclaims it. It is measured by what they are willing to risk to protect it. An avoidant who feels authentic love will begin doing something extraordinary. They will start choosing connection over control. They will let you see the cracks in their armor. They will allow themselves to need you. And for someone who built their identity around independence, that is the ultimate surrender. But here is the deeper truth, and this is where wisdom meets divine principle. Love is not about changing someone. It is about creating a space so safe that they choose to evolve on their own. You cannot force an avoidant to love you. You cannot chase them into intimacy. But when they feel seen without judgment, respected without pressure, and valued without conditions, something awakens inside them. Their nervous system begins to learn that closeness does not equal catastrophe. It equals comfort. And when that shift happens, you will know. They will reach for you first. They will apologize when they would have once justified. They will open up without being cornered. They will protect the relationship instead of protecting their ego. That is authentic love. Now, here is your power in all of this. Do not mistake breadcrumbs for bravery. Growth must be consistent. Effort must be reciprocal. Divine love is not chaotic. It is not a guessing game. It is steady, even when imperfect. The highest form of love calls both people higher. If you see them stretching beyond their comfort zone, choosing presence over distance, truth over silence, connection over isolation, acknowledge it, reinforce it. Celebrate it, because what you appreciate appreciates. And remember this, above all, love is not about finding someone without fear. It is about finding someone willing to face their fear for you. When an avoidant feels authentic love, they will not run from the fire. They will walk through it slowly, sometimes trembling, but they will walk through it with you. That is courage. That is growth. That is love becoming stronger than fear. And when fear no longer leads, love becoming stronger than fear. When someone who has lived most of their life protecting themselves from emotional exposure begins choosing vulnerability over distance, you are witnessing something profound. For an avoidant, vulnerability does not feel natural. It feels like risk. It feels like standing unarmored in a battlefield they once barely survived. So when they move toward openness instead of retreat, understand that this is not casual behavior. It is intentional courage. An avoidant learned early on that closeness can lead to disappointment, suffocation, or abandonment. Their nervous system is wired for self-protection. Distance became their safety. Independence became their identity. So when emotions intensify, their instinct is not to lean in, it is to create space. They withdraw, not because they do not care, but because caring activates fear. That is why vulnerability is such a powerful signal. When they begin sharing their thoughts without being forced, when they admit confusion instead of pretending indifference, when they say that hurt me instead of shutting down, they are overriding years of conditioning. This is not easy for them. It can feel physically uncomfortable. Their heart may race, their mind may scream at them to pull back, but they stay, they speak, they open. Choosing vulnerability over distance might look small on the surface. It might be a simple text saying, "I've been in my head today." It might be a confession like, "I'm not used to needing someone this much." It might be sitting through a hard conversation without disappearing. But beneath those moments is a powerful internal shift. They are deciding that connection with you is more important than their old survival pattern. And here is what makes it authentic. Vulnerability for an avoidant is rarely dramatic. It is subtle. It is gradual. They will not suddenly become emotionally extravagant. Instead, they will begin offering pieces of themselves that were once locked away, stories from their past, fears about the future, insecurities they have never voiced out loud. Each disclosure is a brick removed from the wall they built around their heart. You may even notice the tension in them when they open up, a pause before they speak, a nervous laugh after sharing something personal, a tendency to minimize what they just revealed. That is the discomfort of growth. That is someone stretching beyond emotional muscle memory. And growth like that only happens when love feels real. Because here is the truth. Avoidants do not become vulnerable for just anyone. They protect their inner world carefully. If they are letting you see the unpolished parts, their doubts, their triggers, their attachment fears, it means you have become emotionally significant. You have moved from being an option to being important. Choosing vulnerability also means they start asking for reassurance instead of pretending they do not need it. They might say, "Are we okay?" instead of silently creating distance. They might admit jealousy or fear of losing you instead of acting detached. These moments are not weakness. They are trust in action. When they choose vulnerability, they are also choosing accountability. They begin to acknowledge how their withdrawal affects you. They attempt to explain their triggers instead of expecting you to decode them. They might say, "When things get intense, I shut down. I'm working on that." That statement alone reflects emotional investment. It is easy to miss these signals if you are expecting loud declarations of love. But authentic love, from an avoidant, often whispers before it shouts. It shows up in the quiet bravery of staying present, speaking honestly, and resisting the urge to escape. And every time they choose openness over isolation, they are silently saying, "You matter more than my fear." For someone with avoidant tendencies, life is often carefully compartmentalized. Work exists in one space, friends in another, personal goals in another. Emotions are stored in controlled private corners. This structure gives them a sense of independence and safety. It allows them to feel in control. So when they begin including you in their future plans instead of keeping you in a separate emotional box, that shift carries deep meaning. An avoidant does not casually intertwine lives. They are comfortable with autonomy. In fact, autonomy is sacred to them. The idea of merging futures can unconsciously trigger fears of losing freedom, identity, or self-sufficiency. That's why future-oriented language is such a significant indicator of authentic love. When they start saying "we" instead of "I," something inside them is evolving. It may begin subtly. They might mention a concert happening months from now and assume you'll go together. They might talk about a trip next year and include you without hesitation. They might reference holidays, family gatherings, or long-term goals with your presence woven into the picture. These are not throwaway comments. For someone who guards their independence, this is intentional emotional investment. Including you in their future means they are no longer seeing the relationship as temporary or situational. Avoidants often protect themselves by mentally preparing for impermanence. They may keep one foot out the door just in case, but when they start building timelines that clearly involve you, they are lowering that defense. They are allowing themselves to imagine continuity. And imagination is powerful because we only envision long-term scenarios with people we value deeply. This inclusion also signals trust. The future represents uncertainty, and uncertainty can feel threatening to someone who relies on control to feel secure. By planning ahead with you, they are embracing shared uncertainty. They are choosing partnership over isolation. That choice reflects emotional significance. You may notice they begin consulting you about major decisions, career moves, living arrangements, financial plans, even personal development goals. Instead of deciding independently and informing you afterward, they ask for your input. They care how their choices affect you. That is a profound shift from emotional detachment to relational responsibility. For an avoidant, commitment is not just about labels. It is about integration. When they start integrating you into their life blueprint, they are dissolving the invisible walls between my world and our world. They might introduce you more intentionally to close friends or family. They may talk about shared milestones, moving in, building something together, growing side by side. These conversations require vulnerability because they acknowledge desire, and desire creates exposure. To say, I see you in my life months or years from now, is to admit attachment. It is to admit hope. And hope can feel risky to someone who learned not to depend on others. But when love feels authentic and safe, hope begins to outweigh fear. This shift also shows up in consistency. They follow through on long-term plans. They reserve time for you in advance. They prioritize shared experiences rather than keeping their schedule entirely self-directed. That consistency communicates, I am not planning an exit, I am planning a future. It is important to recognize that avoidance may not express this with dramatic declarate ions about forever. Instead, their love reveals itself through steady integration, through the way they naturally assume your presence in upcoming chapters of their life story, through the comfort with which they speak about next year and instinctively picture you there. When someone who once protected their independence at all costs begins designing tomorrow with you in mind, that is not obligation, that is choice. And love is most powerful when it is chosen freely. For someone with avoidant patterns, conflict does not simply feel like disagreement. It feels like danger, raised voices, emotional intensity, unmet expectations. All of it can activate a deep internal alarm that says, this is unsafe, get out. Withdrawal becomes the fastest way to regulate. Silence becomes protection. Distance becomes relief. So when they stay present during conflict instead of shutting down or disappearing, you are witnessing a profound act of emotional growth. An avoidance instinct in difficult moments is often to detach. They may go quiet. They may physically leave the room. They may say, I don't want to talk about this, not because the issue is small, but because their nervous system is overwhelmed. Conflict can feel like a threat to their independence, their competence, or even their worth. Staying engaged requires them to override a powerful survival response. So when they choose to remain in the conversation, even if they look uncomfortable, even if they need pauses to regulate, it is significant. Presence during conflict means they value the relationship more than their temporary relief. It means they are willing to endure discomfort in order to maintain connection. You might notice that instead of disappearing for days, they say, I need a moment to think, but I'm not going anywhere. That statement alone reflects transformation. It communicates reassurance rather than abandonment. It shows awareness that their withdrawal impacts you. That awareness is love maturing. Staying present does not mean they suddenly become emotionally fluent. They may struggle to articulate feelings. They may become defensive before softening. They may need structure or clarity to navigate the discussion, but the difference is this. They are not escaping, they are attempting to engage. For an avoidant, conflict can unconsciously trigger fears of engulfment or rejection. They may interpret intense emotion as proof that the relationship is unstable. Their old pattern would be to detach early to avoid deeper hurt. But when they begin tolerating emotional tension without exiting, they are building resilience. They are teaching their nervous system that disagreement does not equal catastrophe. And that shift is powerful. When they listen to your perspective without immediately minimizing it, that is effort. When they attempt to explain their own reactions instead of stonewalling, that is accountability. When they circle back to a hard conversation after taking space, rather than pretending it never happened, that is commitment. Conflict, handled consciously, deepens intimacy. But to access that depth, both people must stay in the arena. For an avoidant, remaining in the arena requires courage. It requires trust that the relationship can survive discomfort. It requires belief that vulnerability during tension will not be weaponized. You may see small but meaningful changes. They maintain eye contact instead of looking away. They ask clarifying questions instead of assuming criticism. They admit, I shut down when I feel overwhelmed, but I want to work through this. That admission signals emotional investment. What once would have triggered complete withdrawal now triggers effort. That effort is love confronting fear. Presence during conflict also means they start prioritizing repair. They may reach out after an argument instead of waiting for you to bridge the gap. They may apologize even if awkwardly. Apologize requires humility, and humility requires security. When they can say, I didn't handle that well, they are choosing connection over pride. Avoidants who feel authentic love begin to understand that intimacy is not the absence of tension, it is the willingness to navigate tension together. By staying present, they are silently communicating, you are worth working through this with, and that decision to remain engaged when every instinct says retreat is one of the clearest signs that their love is real. For someone with avoidant tendencies, expressing needs and emotions does not come naturally. In fact, it can feel deeply unnatural. Many avoidants learned early in life that relying on others led to disappointment, that expressing needs led to rejection, or that emotions were burdensome. So they adapted. They became self-sufficient. They convinced themselves they didn't need much from anyone. Independence became their shield, and emotional minimalism became their strategy. That's why when they begin expressing their needs and emotions, even awkwardly, even imperfectly, it is a powerful signal of authentic love. An avoidant often defaults to, I'm fine, even when they're not. They may suppress hurt, minimize disappointment, or intellectualize feelings rather than experience them. So when they say something like, I actually felt distant from you this week, or I need a little reassurance right now, that is not casual. That is them stepping outside a long-standing defense pattern. Needs require vulnerability. To express a need is to admit dependence at some level, and dependence can feel terrifying for someone who equates it with loss of control. But love shifts priorities. When they care deeply, the desire for connection begins to outweigh the fear of needing. You might notice their attempts are not polished. They may struggle to find the right words. They might circle around a feeling before naming it. They may soften their request with humor, or quickly follow it with, it's not a big deal. That hesitation is the residue of old conditioning. But the fact that they are trying, that they are reaching instead of retreating, speaks volumes. Expressing emotions can be even more challenging. Avoidants are often more comfortable discussing ideas than feelings. Logic feels safe, emotions feel unpredictable. So when they tell you they miss you, that they felt hurt, that they were anxious about losing you, understand the weight of that disclosure. It likely required internal debate. It likely required them to quiet the voice that said, don't say that, just handle it yourself. Love creates the motivation to override that voice. When they begin sharing what triggers them instead of expecting you to guess, they are inviting you into their inner world. They might say, when plans change suddenly, I feel unsettled, or when we argue, I get scared that things will fall apart. These admissions are not just emotional statements. They are bridges. They are saying, I trust you enough to let you see what's underneath. There is also a shift in how they respond to your needs. As they become more comfortable expressing their own, they grow more empathetic toward yours. They begin to see needs not as weaknesses, but as normal parts of intimacy. This mutual understanding deepens safety in the relationship. It is important to recognize that progress may come in waves. There may be moments when they revert to silence, but if the overall pattern shows increasing openness, increasing willingness to articulate feelings, that is growth in motion. When an avoidant expresses a need, they are risking disappointment. When they express emotion, they are risking exposure. But when love feels authentic, those risks feel worthwhile. They begin to realize that suppressing themselves creates distance, and distance threatens the very connection they value. So they choose honesty instead of self-protection. They choose awkward conversations over silent resentment. They choose to say, "This matters to me," even if their voice shakes internally. And in that choice, you see something profound. A person who once survived by needing no one is now allowing themselves to need you. For someone with avoidant patterns, words can be easier than sustained emotional exposure. They may express care in subtle phrases, or even say, "I love you." But what truly reveals authentic love is consistent effort over time, because consistency requires presence. It requires reliability, and reliability requires emotional investment. Avoidants often pride themselves on independence. They are used to relying on themselves, managing their own emotions, solving their own problems. So when they begin making steady, repeated efforts to build trust with you, not just when it is convenient, not just when it feels light and easy, that is significant. Consistency means they show up. They call when they say they will call. They follow through on plans. They check in without being prompted. They remember important details about your life. These behaviors may seem basic in healthy relationships, but for someone who instinctively pulls back when emotions intensify, steady engagement is growth in action. Trust is not built through grand gestures. It is built through predictable care. For an avoidant, predictability can feel like obligation at first, but when love becomes real, consistency becomes a choice rather than a burden. They begin to understand that stability does not trap them. It strengthens the bond. You may notice that they start initiating contact more often. Instead of always responding, they reach out. Instead of waiting for you to set the tone, they participate in creating it. Initiative signals desire. It shows that connection is on their mind, even when you are not physically present. Effort also appears in how they handle misunderstandings. Rather than disappearing after tension, they attempt repair. They send a message to clear the air. They suggest talking things through. They demonstrate that preserving the relationship matters more than avoiding discomfort. This is crucial. Avoidants who do not feel deeply attached will default to detachment under stress. But when they care, they resist that impulse. They may still feel the urge to withdraw, but they counter it with action. They lean in, even if imperfectly. Trust-building effort also means transparency increases. They keep you informed about changes in plans. They communicate when they need space rather than vanishing. They begin to understand that silence creates insecurity, and insecurity erodes connection. So they adjust their behavior intentionally. It is in these adjustments that authentic love becomes visible. Consistency requires emotional regulation. It requires managing internal fears without projecting them outward. When an avoidant actively works on their triggers, perhaps reflecting on why they shut down, perhaps learning healthier communication, that self-awareness is effort directed toward protecting the relationship. Actions are the language of commitment. Anyone can speak affection in a calm moment, but showing up repeatedly, especially when life becomes complicated, reveals depth. When they prioritize time with you despite busy schedules, when they integrate you into routines, when they demonstrate reliability across months rather than days, they are building a foundation. And Wex, you already know that additions are sacred, because an avoidant does not invest sustained energy where they do not feel something meaningful. If they are consistently choosing you, not out of pressure, not out of guilt, but out of genuine intention, It means the connection has moved beyond surface attraction. Their effort becomes quieter but stronger over time. It is in the steady rhythm of presence, the dependable responses, the visible attempts to grow, the willingness to protect what you share. Through repeated, reliable action, they communicate something powerful without dramatic words. I am here. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. For someone with avoidant tendencies, their inner world is often heavily guarded. They may appear calm, self-assured, independent, even emotionally unaffected, but beneath that exterior lives a landscape of fears, insecurities, and unresolved wounds they rarely allow anyone to see. Control has been their protection. Privacy has been their shield. So when they begin allowing you to see their fears and insecurities without running away, you are being invited into sacred territory. Avoidants are not strangers to emotion. They are strangers to safely expressing it. Somewhere in their past, vulnerability felt unsafe. Perhaps their needs were dismissed. Perhaps emotional closeness felt overwhelming. So they learned to suppress, to self-soothe, to detach. They built an identity around strength and independence because that felt survivable. That is why when they expose the parts of themselves that feel weak, confused, or afraid, it carries enormous weight. You might notice it in quiet confessions. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough. Or I get scared that if someone sees all of me, they'll leave. These are not casual admissions. These are core fears surfacing. And for an avoidant to verbalize them, instead of burying them, is an act of trust. Letting you see. Their insecurities means they are risking judgment. It means they are risking rejection. And those risks strike at the heart of their deepest defenses. But love shifts the equation. When they begin to feel that you are a safe place rather than a threat, they slowly lower the armor. This doesn't happen dramatically. It happens layer by layer. They may start by sharing a painful memory from childhood, then perhaps a story about a past relationship that hurt them more than they admitted at the time. They may reveal how they cope when they feel overwhelmed. Maybe they isolate, maybe they distract themselves, maybe they pretend nothing is wrong. In explaining these patterns, they are allowing you to see the mechanics behind their behavior, and that visibility creates intimacy. You might also notice moments where their confidence softens. They admit they are unsure. They ask what you truly think of them. They express anxiety about losing you. These are moments when their carefully maintained composure gives way to authenticity. It is not weakness. It is courage. An avoidant who does not feel deeply attached will protect their image. They will keep conversations surface level. They will maintain emotional distance. But when they care, the desire to be known begins to outweigh the desire to appear invulnerable. Allowing you to see their fears also means they stop pretending they are unaffected by conflict or distance. They might admit, when we don't talk, I tell myself I don't care, but I do. That sentence alone reveals an internal battle between defense and desire. By sharing it, they are choosing transparency over protection. This openness may come with discomfort. You may see hesitation in their eyes. You may hear uncertainty in their voice. But if they stay present while revealing their inner struggles, they are demonstrating trust in real time. Authentic love. Transform. IMES avoidance into gradual exposure. It turns secrecy into selective sharing. It replaces emotional walls with emotional doors, not thrown wide open, but unlocked. When someone who built their life around self-reliance begins letting you witness their fragile places without retreating, they are saying something profound without theatrics. I trust you with the parts of me I usually hide. And trust, especially for the avoidant heart, is one of the purest expressions of love. Thank you for allowing these words to speak into your journey. May they awaken clarity, courage, and deeper love within you. Goodbye for now, and remember, the love you seek begins with the strength you choose to embody every single day.